Hey everybody, Matt Johnson here. Major headlines in the case of missing Nancy Guthrie. I know over the past couple days, she's probably dominated your news feed. So I wanted to jump on here and go over some of the major headlines in the case, including the DNA evidence, where it stands, the 911 call, why it might not be released, and the sheriff and how he plays into this and the controversy with his department. So what's going on behind the scenes is the big question. I have a special guest, a world famous homicide detective who is going to decode what might be happening behind the scenes and what he's waiting on. So what is the word, or what is it that you're listening for and you're like, oh, they got something?
The phone call.
Do you think that Nancy was fatally injured? Do you think that she's alive?
Given what we know that she suffered a wound of some kind, I have been from the beginning of the opinion.
And I have a very special guest in the world of DNA. She's going to help us make sense over, the FBI now being involved, what that means, whether or not another lab will also get involved. Is this a delay in the process? We're going to hear from her. But first, do me a favor, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and share this episode with a friend. Now, the case of missing Nancy Guthrie. So here to help break it all down, we have a very special guest. We have Fil Waters, master interrogator, former homicide detective with decades of experience, and president CEO, Kindred Spirits Investigation Security. First off, thank you, sir, for your time. We are dying to get your take on this case.
Well, I appreciate you asking me, Matt. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and before I ask you why no police updates, as we are now in week 12 or beyond, and whether or not the family is being updated, I just wanted to get your take on the case as it stands right now when we're talking about Miss Nancy Guthrie.
Well, I think it's a great topic, of course, to get back to and discuss and see where we are. I don't see anything that stands out to me that we're not where they are supposed to be at this point. So at the beginning of this, what we saw, which was kind of unique in this particular case, is we're seeing an investigation take place in real time. So everybody was focused on it. Everything that came out of this investigation was being put out there. And the media, of course, was following everybody around as everything unfolded. Search warrants are being run. People are being detained and that kind of a thing. So this has been kind of unique with this particular investigation. And I'm not surprised at where we are at this point. I've had investigations that we had a whole lot of stuff, some great evidence, but we just didn't have that piece that we needed to put us over the hump and getting a suspect identified. I mean, the whole goal here, right, is to find the right person who's done the wrong thing. And we've seen the clamoring about the sheriff as an individual, as the sheriff, and the investigation, and this is what happens in something like this. I kind of compared it to the Idaho murders and the clamoring there that took place when this thing wasn't solved in 43 minutes with no commercials. And, they're all over the chief up there in Moscow. So the difference here is that this sheriff has difficulty communicating in the public arena about a high profile case, and admittedly so. So he made some missteps, in my opinion, at the beginning of this thing and just trying to get it out there. Here's what we're doing, and here's how we're progressing. They had 2 press conferences, and then all of a sudden those ended. And then he went off into this, doing these individual interviews, which compounded the problem with him, and it becomes a huge distraction. And so now they're attacking the sheriff personally, politically, and so forth and so on, which in the big picture of the investigation, it distracts from it, and it doesn't help it move it for. It doesn't help it move further along, in my opinion. So the detectives and the agents that are working the case are on it. If anybody thinks that these guys have had, if they're kicking back and just taking their time doing things, that's just not the case. They're fully vested in this. I would be, because I've been involved in these types of investigations, the number of man hours is insurmountable. And we see these things, these pieces of evidence that they're releasing, and of course everybody's got their commentary about it. And the reason they're releasing those particular pieces is because they want the public to be involved in this, because you never know. You're waiting for that phone call, right? So we're waiting for that phone call from the person who says, I know who that is in the video. And that gives them another lead to go in and follow up on. So, and we've watched the process of the DNA and the crime scene processing and that kind of a thing, of which there's been great criticism. I'm just saying that, look, even when the agents went back to the house, the FBI agents went back to the house after the scene had been processed, there's no reason to keep that scene open forever and ever. Amen. When they went back, and each time they went back, they have received a new piece of information or another piece of evidence that has said, well, let's go back and look at this particular lead that we're going to follow up on at the residence. So I understand what they've been doing from perspective of, I've done these same things. I have gone back to scenes because there was something that I may have seen on a video later that took me back to get, let's just say I had a scene where I went back because I saw the suspect put his hand on a chair. We didn't know that until we saw the video. We'd already closed the scene. We'd been in there for hours and upon hours. We went back to it, found the chair, did a DNA swab on that particular chair. So again, we're seeing this thing play out in real time. And so I don't see anything particularly unusual going on here. I think all the stuff going on in the background, these sources that are putting out information, this and that, I think that's a discredit to the investigation. And I think that doesn't help. It distracts from it. And so I've read recently here where much of the DNA evidence, which takes a long time to process, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It's not, when I was in Houston, it was not uncommon for DNA processing to take 6 months to a year. So I don't see anything unusual happening here regarding, I know there was all this people getting their panties in a wad about, oh, they sent it to this private lab in Florida and blah, blah, blah. Look, that's who they had the contract with. That's who they've been dealing with for years. That was and this case still belongs to the Pima County Sheriff's Office. So I've seen recently here where they have sent some DNA evidence. I don't know if that's some samples out of the Florida lab to the FBI. But then I've seen some discussion about a private lab being used that was on the front line of the serial killer in New Jersey, the Rex Heuermann, because they have a facility that can do some processing on DNA that maybe some other labs do not have. So, and that's what brought about the identification of that suspect. So here we are. So clamoring about it went to a private lab. Well, now it's gone to the FBI and everybody's all happy. Well, now they're talking about doing what? Sending it to a private lab to have some other processing done. So I think and once you get all this evidence accumulated, recovered, the processing of it takes time, especially when you're talking about something as intricate as the DNA testing.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. And it's been in the headlines as well over the past couple of days, quite a bit, which is part of the reason why I'm doing this episode, just to kind of answer and go through the headlines that we're seeing. And so later in this episode, the viewer is going to hear from a DNA expert who talks about that lab in question, talks about the FBI, and talks about whether or not this delayed the investigation at all. So that's a little bit later in this episode.
Okay.
But do you think, in your opinion, that DNA will solve this case?
You know, everybody wants to say that's the magic bullet, right? And it's just not. It will be a big part. It may be the part that gets them in the right direction to identifying a suspect. And then the other evidence that's been collected, of course, every affirmative link, it will be compiled. You know, it will be a piling on of this evidence, which will bring about the identification of a suspect and hopefully a successful prosecution. But of course, initially here, the DNA, that's going to link somebody to that scene.
Let's hope. So I guess to follow up with this and button it up about just the sheriff, and people have a lot of opinions on what's going on and whether or not it's impacted the case. But do you think that there hasn't been as many updates or updates at all, really, because he doesn't want a distraction, or because of the internal affairs problems, or maybe he just doesn't have information? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is trying to go back and close the barn door after the horse got out, right? And he's faded so much heat, and I don't have any. We can have our opinions about him politically and the bad optics and that kind of thing, and the internal strife going on in the department. And I've seen some other people of note that have, he needs to be run out of there and all that good stuff. Well, you know what? In 2028, when he runs for re-election, the voters in Pima County will decide whether they want to run him out. Right now, clamoring about him, I think is distracting from Ms. Guthrie and this investigation. And I've seen other former Pima County deputies talking about him and this and that. And I don't, it's two separate topics in my view. If we're going to talk about this Guthrie investigation, let's talk about the investigation. What evidence that we know they have in terms of doing press releases and that kind of thing. That kind of got spoiled when the PIO was not allowed to do press conferences. That's what they're paid to do. They can get out there and they can take questions. They can show what we have. Here's where we are in the investigation without compromising any part of the investigation. So I think so the response of the sheriff has been to just shut down everything. No communication. He's got so many irons in the fire. And I'm not taking a position on him either way. That's all their problem there in Pima County. But regarding the investigation, I think that the choice has been made that all the distraction is taking away from the focus of Ms. Guthrie and the investigation itself.
Okay, so that answers my question there of like they just don't want to distract and they just want to wait for a breakthrough possibly in the case. And public information officer, that's the PIO, that is the person that the reporters call and the person that is allowed to talk to the media. Sometimes a sworn officer, sometimes a civilian, but they share what they can without breaking the integrity of the case. So I call them daily.
Oh, yeah, sure.
When we're talking about the family, though, are they being updated? Do they know more than us?
I don't know that they know more than us, but I'm sure they're being updated. It was interesting when Savannah did her interview. that she spoke well of the investigation, of the detectives, the sheriff's office, and the efforts that they're making. So I would have no doubt that they are being updated as regularly as possible when they have something that is new. They may, I know in my when I was in an investigation similar to this, and we didn't know who the suspect was, and we did have some things on video and so forth and so on, and I was, if the family wasn't contacting me weekly, I was contacting them. And sometimes it may just be, I just wanted to contact you, let you know, here's what we are doing. We don't yet have any results. If we find something that comes back, boom, I will let you know. I have one case in particular that I made a promise to the family that the minute we find the right person who's done this, you will be the first one that I call. And we did. And we got this person identified over 5 months later. And who did I call?
The family.
I called the person that I told them I would be contacting them the minute we had. And I'll never forget it. And it's a powerful moment. Called him on a Sunday. We just had the suspect in custody. And the minute when he answered the phone, I said, "Are you sitting down?" And he knew what I was about to tell him. So it's a very powerful moment. And that's what I'm praying for in this, that's what's going to happen here, because the family, before the media, before the public, before all the true crime people, the family has the right to know first that they have somebody in custody. So that's what I'm praying for that happens here.
Yeah, me too, especially given the unique nature that victim's daughter is a news anchor. I'm hoping that it's done correctly and she doesn't hear about it when her co-anchor is reading it next to her or something horrible like that.
Right.
So you've already answered where you feel we are in the investigation, your thoughts on it all, if we've stalled. You've talked about the DNA, which I'm going to have another expert talk about in a little bit. The other headlines going on right now is with the other evidence that we're really waiting for. So we're waiting on the DNA evidence, right? And then we're also waiting for, I don't know if it's going to be more video or if it's going to be just pictures from the back area cameras, right? They told us, because we didn't know we were going to get this video initially. First, they said that it wasn't hooked up, that there was no video. Then they said images. Then they released the video. So maybe there's going to be a situation like that in the backyard. But why is that taking so long, you think?
Well, I'll tell you, Matt, the forensic digital stuff is another time-consuming operation. I have myself sat and watched hours of video to try to find a 20-second shot, right? So there is no doubt in my mind they have more video than just what they've released. So they're going over that, and I know that when I've had cases like similar to this where we had video, I sent it, many of those videos, the best videos that we had, to NASA, who did enhancement on the videos. And that takes time. So all of it's just not, it's not CSI, it's not NCIS, investigate. It's just not those television shows, right? You don't just hit a tab, hit a key on a keyboard, and boom, all of a sudden you've got the person, their picture, where they were born. It's just that it doesn't happen that way. So the digital evidence takes time, again, because we don't know how much they have, for one thing. How much was stored in the cloud? by Google with their Nest cameras and so forth and so on. So it's just another piece of the investigation that will take time to develop.
Is this guy working alone? Is he experienced? I haven't asked you personally. What's your take on this guy?
I'm not that shot right there, where we're using a bush of some kind to try to cover the lens. That's not a real impressive move. That doesn't tell me that this is a particularly sophisticated crook. So I would say, and the getup that he's got on there, and I think it's been determined that most of it, if not all of it, was purchased at a Walmart or online on Walmart. It looks like he's been watching a lot of television, and they got the gloves and the whole bit, and and the mask and that. My only curiosity here is what's in the backpack, and it doesn't. I would have to say, just based on that, I think we're talking about one person, at least initially, at the scene. But obviously, Ms. Guthrie had to be moved. And my sense is that whoever is there on the site had to make a phone call or a text message or some sort of communication to get a person in a vehicle to pull up, because we know that the blood drops go up to the end of the driveway and then all of a sudden they're gone. So I would think there's got to be at least two people here involved, one who's providing transportation and then the other one who may be actually in committing the act.
Yeah, I'm curious why we haven't heard more about the backpack or any of that. I kind of figured that we would hear more about it by now. And to your point, I thought we were going to get more images maybe from the front door, because like you're saying, I can't imagine that this is all we have.
No.
But, maybe there's a reason why we don't have it. But at this point in time, I would think that any bit of evidence helps drum up more interest in the case. And the goal is to, try to get someone to rat out the person that did this, right? Like get information, something.
Well, and these rewards, one would think, I mean, they're at an amount now that I would think somebody would be looking for a payday. So that's interesting. But again, we don't know what they know. We don't know what the investigators know. And so perhaps they have that. I think right now they're in a mode of keeping a lot of things close to the vest because of the things that have been released. And there has been, at least we don't know that there's been any kind of credible phone call made leading them to other evidence and that kind of a thing. So we saw that at the front end, right? We're detaining people, we're running search warrants and this and that. And that was primarily based on the, thousands of phone calls they were getting. And so I think right now there may be a purposeful lull in the investigation, and it's giving them time to just hit the bricks and do some just down and dirty detective work without the distractions of the media and the sheriff and all this other stuff that's been spun around it. So again, what I'm prayerful of is that they've got something that they're hot on, and when that is ready to be released, then that's when it will happen. And so all the other stuff just becomes noise.
Yeah, do you think that? So you don't think that the guy was working alone on whatever level, and do you think that he was using some sort of a communication device? Would he have had his phone on? What questions do you have?
Well, that's a great question. So, it depends on how he was communicating. I know somebody popped up and said it looks like a handheld or a walkie-talkie. That's a That's a strap on the, in my opinion, that's a strap on the backpack. But I think we could possibly think that the person's using a cell phone. They may be using some sort of a handheld device, but I don't see any evidence of that on this guy. If they are using a phone, it would probably be limited. It would be, I turn the phone on, you need to come up here with the car, and I turn the phone off. You may have a very limited use of the phone. Now, the other thing I would think they are doing is, we've got a time frame here, and I have done this myself. The FBI comes in and they'll do a dump on those cell site towers. And their analysts at the FBI will look at, and in my case, when I did the dump, there were literally over 100,000 phone calls in just this 1 hour period of time, and in just one tower. So, and it takes time. I remember and this is the one I was telling you about that was a 5-month long investigation. It was in the 5th month that the FBI, the special agent with the FBI that was doing the analysis on the cell site dumps, came to my office and gave me the update. And he was very excited that he had brought the 100,000 phone calls down to 30,000. And I'm like, I was amazed, but still 30,000 phone calls to get down to one number made in that 1 hour period of time. So again, I would think they're doing that. And that's why you bring the FBI into what was reported as a kidnapping, because of those resources that they have that local authorities do not have. So I just think there's a lot of moving parts in this investigation that we are just not aware of, that the investigators, the agents, the detectives are ramping up.
Well, I hope so. And, I find that cell phone data very fascinating, especially because it was a big part of a lot of trials that I covered, like Karen Reed 1 and 2 and all of that. And really, it's the digital footprint nowadays that could crack the case. And I talked to an former FBI special agent that specializes in that sort of thing. If anyone wants to look at that episode, it's fascinating and what he predicts they're doing, which is what you echoed. But when we're talking about phone calls, how about the simple 911 call? How come that's not being released? Usually when I'm covering stories, it's released pretty early on.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I would have to believe that there's something in an evidentiary way, is some sort is probative of some kind, in some way, or they're trying to use it to eliminate something. So that is interesting. But you know what? There's having been involved in these types of investigations, it's a matter of, as the detective in charge of the evidence, you're the one that's in charge of this investigation. Of course, you've got your partner working with you and then other people working around doing many different things, but there's always a lead that's in charge, and he's got to make investigative decisions. What do we release to the public? What do we not release to the public? What are we going to keep close to the vest? Because we got to remember that later on, when they do get a suspect, they bring him in for an interview, and we're hopeful that that person or persons will submit to an interview that they don't want to feed that person a bunch of information that they have. They want that person who they believe is the suspect, the right person who's done the wrong thing, to tell them what they have in evidence. So many times there are going to be certain things that are kept back because we don't want the general public to know, because the person out there that committed it is listening as well. And so we want them to tell us what we know that nobody else does except for them.
Yeah, and that helped out in a lot of cases, and I'm thinking of, I don't have the exact example, but like John Benet Ramsey, when you have these famous cases where people just want to be inserted in them, for whatever
Oh, yeah.
reason. And like, the fake ransom notes, some of them are not real, if any. And, they just want to be included in it for some sick reason. But you're right, and FBI is able to say, no, you're not a part of it because you said this wrong or whatever, So that's perfect example there. Before my viewers get over to the DNA stuff, I wanted to get your take on another big headline right now. And this is Fox Digital video, but remember Brian Enton went up to the door as well, and he was showing all of the blood, and that's how we kind of learned about that. But one of the big headlines about it right now is not the fact that it's the blood, but maybe she was coughing up blood, and maybe she wasn't necessarily injured after a beating or something of that horrible nature. But what was your take on where this blood may come from?
Well, I have read. Everybody's got their opinion about the blood. I've read, the noted pathologist that's given his opinion about the blood. I can only speak to, and I've read where some other blood spatter experts, that kind of thing, have commented about it. I'm just going to speak from the perspective of a homicide cop that's made hundreds of scenes and have seen all manner of blood cast about, blood spatter, blood drops, transfer blood, that kind of a thing. And to me, it looks to me, these are drops. This is not spatter in the sense that we talk about a blow of some kind hitting the head, and we have blood that spatters across the wall, and then we can look at the type of velocity of the spatter itself and that kind of thing. These appear to me to be blood drops. Now, the question is, where are these blood drops coming from? In my opinion, they look to me to be a head wound of some kind. Because even if it's a minor laceration on the head bleeds. And I only know from personal experience because about 2 months ago, I tripped and fell and hit my head on a wood ammo box, Winchester ammo box, and split my head open. And
I'm glad you're okay, though.
Well, 6 stitches later, I'm all right. But when I stood up, I thought to myself, I wonder if I just busted my head open. And it didn't take 2 seconds. And all of a sudden, I'm holding my hand in front of me, and blood is dropping into my hand. So I just make the point that to me, they look like blood drops. And in my opinion, it looks like it would be a head wound of some kind. Now, I know she's 84 years old. The skin is very flaccid. I mean, she could have, it could have been a cut on the arm and produced the same kind of a blood drop. I understand that. But whoever's bringing her out of the house, they're either carrying her wherever the wound is. It's because the blood drops go out to the end of the driveway, right? So wherever the wound is coming from, whether it's an arm, whether it is a head wound, something of that nature, the way they're carrying her is facilitating the nature of the blood drops as they're walking up the driveway. Now, how did she get that? Of course, anybody can speculate about that. She could have been struck across the head with that pistol. She could have fallen down, for that matter, and hit her head, or hit her arm on some other piece of furniture that caused the skin to tear and so forth. So the concern here is that there is a wound of some kind. Ms. Guthrie is hurt in some way that's causing the bleeding.
Yeah, it's tragic, and I wish that we knew more. And of course, we're hoping for the best. And what we do know about the front area there, what was finally disclosed, is that it's her DNA. So we know that. I'm not sure if any other DNA was detected, but we do know that other DNA sources is being detected from inside the home. And we just learned, including a hair, and you and I just talked about it. It's now gone to the FBI, and whether or not that goes to another lab that helped with the Lisk Long Island serial killer case and unmasking Rex Heuermann, that's yet to be determined as of the recording of this. But I'm going to bring in the DNA expert now, and then I'm going to continue to ask you questions on the back end.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Joining in the conversation, we have Suzanna Ryan, forensic DNA consultant and laboratory director. First off, you're a big name in the world of genetic genealogy and forensics. Thank you for being here for our discussion about the Nancy Guthrie case.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So, there's been big headlines this week, or at least we thought that there were big headlines, right? In terms of the DNA now, the FBI being involved with the testing, or at least consulting. Can you make sense of it for us? How do you understand it?
First you have the FBI saying, oh, we wanted this hair. We have these, advanced technologies. And then you have them clarifying saying, no, this hair was collected originally, and this is stuff we've always had. We've always had this technology. So it's difficult to ascertain.
I think that a lot of us are confused, but the bottom line, before we get into some of the details with all of this and what we do know and what we don't, do you think DNA is going to be the thing that solves this case?
I would say either DNA or some sort of digital footprint.
So when we're talking about the latest headlines with this case, I'm just going to put it on the screen right here. So this is from the FBI, and this is Ben Williamson, the assistant director for public affairs with the FBI. He posted this on X, and I'm going to paraphrase. He's basically saying it's not new DNA. FBI asked to test the DNA 2 months ago. Same technology as always, but the sheriff sent it to a private lab. So you're in this world for us. Mm-hmm. Is this a good private lab that it was sent to? The DNA Labs International, as I understand it, in Florida. I know that they're a smaller lab. How do they fit in all this?
Frankly, the private lab has everything the FBI has and probably a little bit more. For example, they use the MVAC, which is a way to collect DNA. That's something that I use in my lab as well. It's really good at collecting low-level DNA, trace DNA, just kind of contact DNA. The FBI doesn't use that in their laboratory. The only delay, and I would consider this probably a slight delay, is that private labs do not have direct access to upload profiles into CODIS, which is the Combined DNA Index System, which is our national DNA database.
Yeah, do you think that the FBI being involved now is it likely that, and I'm going to butcher the name here, is it Astria Forensics? Mm-hmm. Do you think that they're going to be shortlisted? They're the ones that helped with the Gilgo Beach mystery turned into the Rex Heuermann arrest. And that was also done through familial DNA, through genetic genealogy, through his daughter.
They may be, for sure. So I think it's Astrea, but they are the pioneers in doing the rootless hair testing, doing what they call whole genome sequencing on rootless hairs. And they've done some amazing work.
How would you have approached the case, or how would you approach it now if you were involved?
I guess I would say the only thing that I've seen that was a little frustrating for me looking in from the outside is things like those the plants that we know that the perpetrator picked up and held in front of the camera. He very well could have transferred his DNA onto that. And I know that I saw pictures of those plants just sitting outside, strewn about on the mat for a long time. And then the welcome mat, is kind of another item. People were in and out walking on that. It's probably still on their front porch. And that's where we know he was standing. And again, because he had that flashlight in his mouth, there's a chance that saliva dripped. I mean, it's a small chance, but hey, let's collect it and look. So other than that, I can't really speak to, what was done or not done. Like I said, I don't think it's a problem to use a private lab. I mean, yes, maybe I'm biased because I'm a private lab director, but honestly, I've worked in public labs as well. And just knowing what this lab's capabilities was, there was no detriment sending it there.
I certainly enjoy your time and talking to you. Suzanna Ryan, DNA consultant, lab director. How else can we get a hold of you?
You can go to my website, which is ryanforensicdna.com. And I have all my information there. I love talking about DNA. So have any questions, I'm happy to help you out.
Well, hopefully the next time we chat, it'll be after the breakthrough that we've all been waiting for.
That'd be great. Yes.
Thank you for your time. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we just heard from the DNA expert there, getting her opinion on all of this. And, we've already talked about your take on the blood on the porch. Do you think that Nancy was fatally injured? Do you think that she's alive? Could be?
No. I mean, I'll answer that question directly. The length of time, given her health concerns, given her age, given what we know that she suffered a wound of some kind, I have been from the beginning of the opinion that I am not convinced that she was taken out of the house alive. If she was on the downhill side of being her life taken. So I hate to say that, but it's the reality is that I think that was a body removal. I don't think that was a kidnapping. Or the other possibility is that it started out as one thing and then it ended up as another thing. So just for the sake of our discussion, let's say it started out as a burglary and then they got in there and what happened. And then it turned into either a body removal or possibly the person thought, well, look, we get her out of here and then turn it into an abduction, a kidnapping. And I'm willing to say I'm wrong if it turns out that it was all a kidnapping from the very beginning. I'm not married to any particular theory, but I just having worked these types of cases, they don't turn out well when the circumstances begin like this one did. And so I think there's always hope, and you always tell the family, we don't want to give up hope and that kind of thing. But the reality at some point is going to set in, and I would be, I tell you, if it happens, it would be a miracle. And if Miss Guthrie is by some fantastic means is alive, and she's been cared for with her medical situation, that kind of thing, and she is alive. I mean, hallelujah! That would be amazing. So, but I just think I'm a guy that lets the evidence lead me where I need to be, and I just think in this particular case, the evidence is leading to they're looking for a recovery of Ms. Guthrie rather than a.
And we're all praying for some sort of a miracle here, but even Suzanna Guthrie, who is former court TV like myself and has been on, countless crime scenes, she changed her verbiage when she was talking about her plea to the abductors and whether or not the ransom notes are real, saying, we just need some sort of closure. We need her. So, meaning they need her for a funeral and to say goodbye and a send off and all of that. Do you think that she ever left Arizona? Do you think that she could be in Mexico?
I guess there's been some speculation of that. I will say this. Pima County covers 9,000 square miles. Much of it, if not most of it, is desert. And there are plenty of places right there at 9,000 square miles they can put a body. Or they can put parts of a body. So there's I can't imagine whoever did this would go to, and I realize they're close to Mexico, that kind of thing, but this is a deal where you got to get rid of this as quickly as possible. Put it someplace where the likelihood of it being found is pretty remote. So I would be, again, I'll say I'm wrong if I'm wrong, but I would be very surprised if she was taken into the interior of Mexico.
And before I let you go, before we wrap up here, I just wanted to circle back with, I think that you're one of the first people that says that this wasn't, that I've talked to, a planned abduction, because, there's the casing, and I'm a layperson, I'm just like the regular viewer,
Right.
but you have all the experience, but, there was the casing, we know, of her house. And then with the doors being propped open in the back, I mean, to you, could that have been a planned robbery? And maybe they think, oh, she has a lot of money. Maybe there's a safe in the house because she's Savannah's mom, something like that instead?
Well, sure. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. I don't know the door being propped open, and that comes from Savannah herself, because I think
Right.
it was her sister at the scene made some suggestion that the doors are propped open. But we know that, at least from the evidence that we're seeing, that Ms. Guthrie was taken out the front door. And that door was not propped open. And these doors are burglar doors. These are heavy steel burglar doors. If the ones on the back are similar to the one on the front. And when I heard her say, the sister said, well, we're here now and the doors are propped open, I don't know what context that's being said in. Is she seeing the doors propped open after law enforcement got there, EMS got there, people have gone in and out, and it was just more convenient to prop those doors open rather than going in and out and opening them and closing them? So we don't even know what the timeline is for the doors being propped open. The assumption was that whoever did this propped those doors open. And I'm not ready to buy that completely, because there's a lot of reasons why those doors could have been propped open and who propped them open. So to me, that's not terribly significant in the big picture of things. And the house being cased, I think, by a similar looking individual, if I remember correctly. So then we go back to my question is, why were they casing it? Well, if their plan was to burglarize the house, they would be casing it for that purpose. So, burglars are going to do that, not anticipating they're going to end up having to take a body out or get involved in what turns into an abduction. So the casing of the property, I think we got to put it in kind of context of what were they doing? I mean, what was the purpose of it? And I don't know, to me, it just seems more realistic that the purpose of the casing would be to burglarize the residence.
Yeah, and hopefully we find out what's going to crack this case wide open. What are you listening for? You have a different ear for this sort of thing than I do, and maybe the viewer or the listener. I mean, you've investigated countless cases. So what is the word, or what is it that you're listening for, and you're like, oh, they got something?
The phone call. The
911 call?
No. The phone call from the person who has the information leading to the correct suspect. I think that's what will, and I'm speaking from my own experience. I'm telling you, that case I was telling you about that went on for 5 months, it was a phone call. And it was a phone call from a woman scorned. And I'll take a phone call from a woman scorned all day long. And so when I see this case and where we are now, I know some people have suggested that it may be a woman. I don't think so. I think this is a male. And so that's what I'm on this one. I'm thinking this is what will bust this thing open, unless, of course, they get some DNA stuff back, and this person is somehow entered into CODIS or entered into some database somewhere that reveals and then I guess they can go the way of genealogical DNA, that kind of thing. So, but I think that's what will do this, the phone call.
I am hopeful like you, and I hope that we get answers. Savannah and her family get answers sooner than later. Fil Waters, former homicide detective, president, CEO, Kindred Spirits Investigation Security. How do we get a hold of you?
Well, you can call me. You go to my website, www.kindredspiritsinvestigations.com. You can call me 833-639-5747.
Well, there you go. And maybe the person of interest or that person scorned will give you a call. And one final button-up note on that. People that do use the tip line, they are really anonymous, aren't they?
Yes, they are. As a matter of fact, we use Crime Stoppers a lot in Houston. And I know that we, the detectives, never had an anonymous caller tipster identified to us, and they are not identified. Even we have asked, they will not identify the tipster to us, and only if the tipster agrees to come forward to talk to us face to face, the detectives, is the only time you're ever going to find out who that person is. Everything is anonymous. The delivery of any kind of reward is anonymous. And I know there's people out there, all the Eeyores that think that, no, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. Well, I will tell you, I do not know of any, in 33 years in law enforcement in the Houston, Texas area, and in Houston, Texas, 23 years a homicide detective, I have not heard of one story of a tipster being compromised in a good tip, receiving the money and moving on. And if anybody ever gets compromised in that type of a scenario, it's because the tipster themselves could not keep their mouth shut.
Well, I think that is the perfect PSA to end this case and this episode. Thank you, Fil.
Oh, thank you for having me, Matt. I appreciate it.
Let's keep the Guthrie family in our thoughts and prayers. Hopefully, they get answers soon and Nancy can come home. The FBI is offering a $100,000 cash reward. Crime Stoppers also $102,000, if not more. And the Guthrie family, $1 million. Anyone with any information, call 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can remain anonymous. That's going to do it for this episode. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next time.